Hello and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always here at the Pig and Whistle in Stormwind, I go for a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. This episode will be going over the new, the next and the drama of WoW. Essentially we're going to be looking at the patch that's just been released, we're going to be looking at the next patch that's going to be released, and we're going to be looking at some hardcore drama that may or may not have happened. Which is it's quite spicy, I'm not gonna lie. But we will get into the weekly news. We have Basil. How have I spelt this? I'm pretty sure I spelt this wrong. Basil and the Sakali Elders as your world bosses for this week. One is located in the Azure Span, the other in Zaralak Cavern. We have Battleground event this week, so you get more honour for doing Battlegrounds and participating. Cooking Impossible is your brawl for the week. Essentially, you pick up ingredients and take them to your faction's cooking pot. You can steal the opposition faction's ingredients and such. Fortified, Volcanic, and Spiteful are your mythic affixes for this week. Fortified, the non-boss enemies have increased health and damage, and any mobs that they spawn. Volcanic, the small volcano on the floor, you'll see it, move out of it. Spiteful, when you kill a mob, essentially there is a spirit that rises from it and it will fixate on a player and follow them. These die very slowly by themselves, or you can kind of, dot them up and stuff, but you can just make sure you don't get hit by them. Felamalorn is the weapon that we are going to be looking at the history of this week. It's quite a rich history, but there's quite a lot to it actually, but I'll try and narrow it down essentially. So, essentially, it's a blade that burned like the sun, it's described as. Dathramar was the first wielder of it, and essentially it was passed down to his great-grandson, Anastarian Sunstrider, who wielded it against the Armani Trolls, the Armani Trolls being the sort of inhabitants of the northern part of Kalimdor. Nope, Eastern Kingdoms, sorry. When the Eastern Kingdoms wasn't the Eastern Kingdoms, kind of like the top left part of... If you ever think of the world as we have it, like in real life, our Earth, you have obviously the continents. Well, at one point that was called Pangea. It was all one world. This is what World of Warcraft was. It was all a round ball and everything was together. It was just a big landmass. The Armani Trolls were in the top right of this, and that is where Kalimdor obviously split off and the whole sundering happened. You know, that's a totally different story, but essentially he fought off the Armani Trolls after founding Quel'Thalas. Among the Trolls, bred of the Spellblade, which was Felamalorn, and essentially it was feared. The troll witch doctors and stuff set about casting hexes and curses against the weapon, but history bears out that even the darkest sort of like hexes and voodoo magic did basically nothing to Felamalorn. And it's said that 1,000 Armani trolls were killed by the blade itself. During the Scourge invasion of Quel'Thalas, Anastarian wielded the sword against Arthas, but was grievously wounded, and the Death Knights, he grievously wounded the Death Knight's steed Invincible with it. Towards the end of their battle, Felamalorn and Frostmourne clashed together, but the Felamalorn blade was severed into two upon its collision. This is how Invincible did die, and no, I don't believe it. No, Invincible died just to like a normal horse stuff. They just couldn't walk anymore. Their leg was like broken or something like that. Essentially, it was broken into two pieces, and Anastarian was ultimately defeated. It was last seen when Arthas engaged Kel'Thas. Kel'Thas being the person who picked up Felamalorn and reforged it. And essentially, during the battle of the Lich King and like Kel'Thas, the blades clashed once again, but Falamalorn didn't shatter this time. As it is a magical blade, it actually gets stronger when it is repaired, according to lore anyway, essentially. But obviously, with Kale, he kind of went a bit crazy, and it was rumoured that he buried it in Quel'Thalas somewhere. So fast forward many years later, and you have Leandra Sunstrider, who is a very distant relative, essentially took it upon herself to find Falamalorn, and she became very obsessed with it. And it's not specified, but she just disappears essentially. She apparently found the blade in Icecrown Citadel, only to be raised as a undead by the Lich King, as she had perished essentially. So this is where the adventurers come in, us, and we head to Icecrown to take the blade off of her and put her to rest essentially. We go and claim the ancient magical blade for our own. It's a very basic version of Falamalorn, but it's still a very cool weapon, very cool to look at. It was wielded by a lot of very powerful mages and all of that. Kel'Thas Sunstrider being probably the biggest one, but it's a very cool blade. I would very much recommend getting it on your Fire Mage, and the appearances on it are very, very cool. So, what's new in this current patch that we have just dropped? Well, everything's crashing, everything's breaking, everything's needing emergency repairs, hot fixes. That's about it. No, essentially what we're looking at is a lot of PvP changes, or a lot of class changes in general. You kind of see that with every single patch, either start of a big major patch or in the middle of two major patches. You see big and a lot of changes. You have arena frames that were added into the game. You have the most important thing is probably Naxxramas and the old Scholarments. This is what I'll probably be focusing on the most. So old Naxxramas and Scholarments were part of obviously the old world when World of Warcraft first came out. Naxxramas, the old version, has not been available since Wrath of the Lich King. Scholarments since Mists of Pandaria. Well, now you can actually enter these instances, a form of these instances, I should say, by doing a few things. Essentially, Scholarments, you've got to go in there, pick up a few things, do a ritual, and you can teleport back. And then you kind of do the same with unlocking Naxxramas. There's way too many steps to go through it in massive detail, but you get a couple pieces, run around the Plaguelands for a bit, picking up one or two things, you turn them in, do a ritual, unlock Scholarments. You need to unlock Scholarments to unlock Naxxramas, because there's a Argent Dawn commission in the old Scholarments that you pick up, you restore, and then you do some stuff in Stratholme, and you get Naxxramas. So there isn't a different loot table for this Naxxramas. You are in an old version of Naxxramas, yes, but there isn't a different loot table. Now, there are things that obviously were in the 40-man version that weren't in the Wrath of the Lich King version. There was someone who made the glacial pieces. Essentially, the glacial pieces were stuff that you needed in order to complete the Sapphiron boss fight before Kel'Thuzad, the final boss. So the penultimate boss of Naxxramas, you needed these glacial sets, and you had to craft them via someone who was trapped in the necropolis. And you can learn all of these glacial sets now and make them and craft them and stuff, and they are very cool transmogs. But you can also get tier 3 pieces. Now, the way that you get tier 3 pieces is by picking up the old frozen runes that are in Naxxramas, by picking up some scraps as well, located on or can be looted from any sort of mob. And then you obviously turn them in with some gold and you can get your tier 3. It is a lot of gold, by the way. A lot of gold. I Would recommend doing this if you have nothing else to spend your gold on, but if you've got that much gold, please just buy a bloody WoW token or something. Like, save yourself some IRL money, because that much gold being spent on a piece of like a shoulder piece, it's much worth like saving your actual money. But yeah, essentially, you're looking at like quite a lot of time that can be spent in Naxxramas farming these old tier pieces, which is really cool. It's really good content that they needed to add, and they are still finding more and more answers, because it is kind of a secret, like a secret way or a secret instance. And the secret finding Discord for World of Warcraft are hard at work finding more and more secrets. You can get a mount from this version of the world of Naxxramas. It's the Thane mount, you know, the dwarf from the Four Horsemen. It's that mount, which is really cool. And they're looking into getting the weapons as well for, or they're looking at potential weapons that can be found and unlocked in this old version of Naxxramas, which is really, really cool. Next patch, we have name Fury Incarnate. That is the name of the patch that we are looking at. So essentially the PTR went up today for 10.1.7, which is really, really good. 10.2 will come out probably around BlizzCon time, just after BlizzCon time, something like that. That's when they will announce, obviously, the new expansion at BlizzCon. But essentially, what you're looking at is a few different things in Fury Incarnate. You're looking at new public events, so Dream Surges is what they're calling this. Each week, one of the 4 original zones in Dragon Isles, the Waking Shores, Anaran Plains, Thaldraszus, and the Expan, will be affected by waking dream portals across the zones. For those who seek an additional challenge, encounters with rare creatures and event bosses will also have a chance to drop ungraded gear. Ungraded being the stuff where you can upgrade it to a higher item level. The best part about this patch, in my honest opinion, heritage armor for Night Elves and Forsaken. Now, the Forsaken armor looks quite cool. We've not seen the Night Elf armor yet, but the Forsaken one, you have a tombstone on your back. You know, you've got this not balaclava. No, it's like this mask and a hood pulled over your head. I completely forget what they're called. I swear they have a name, but it's a very spiky heritage armor, which is really cool, and I rate it. It is very cool, very cool. You have new customizations for Night Elves, Forsaken, and more. They don't really elaborate on this, but essentially you can get body tattoos for the Night Elves and stuff like that, which is really cool. Really, really cool. And then you're looking at Mega Dungeon Heroic difficulty, which is Dawn of the Infinites, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so they'll split that into 2 wings. They'll make obviously 2 dungeons out of it, like they always do for every single mega dungeon. And then you have new story quests, obviously, for carrying on the Valdrakken quest line, stuff like that. And then they have a holiday refresh, Brewfest and Hallow's End. So what this tells me is essentially it will be coming out before Halloween, because they have to do it before Hallow's End comes out. Otherwise, there's no point doing the holiday refresh if that holiday's just finished. So we kind of have a time, we have an end date for when this can drop, and that is essentially the 18th of October, I believe. That's when Hallow's End starts, 18th or something. So 3 months. Within 3 months, we will have this patch, which is really, really cool. They are chugging out these patches so quickly. It's absolutely amazing. So there's a lot to look forward to in the next patch, and the PTR is already up. They did make a bit of a mistake with it. It says that it's a 10.1.0 patch, but it's just a typo essentially. It is the 10.1.7 patch, but don't get confused if you want to try out the PTR. So the biggest part about this episode is the drama. that happened in Hardcore Classic. So, Hardcore Classic, if you die, delete the character. That's it. GG's, go next. No kind of redos or anything. You can't reset the spirit healer. You can't run back to your corpse. That's it. Everything you worked for, done, dusted, delete the character, get out of here. We know how it kind of works at this point. So there's a lot of people enjoy the leveling experience of hardcore, which is fun. That's kind of where the majority of people are. There's a niche group that enjoy the raiding. And this group were obviously progressing through the raids to eventually kill the final boss of World of Warcraft Classic, the hardest boss that you can on the server, essentially, which was Kel'Thuzad. Now, to put this into perspective, they have about 20 to 30 days game time, like on these characters, 20 to 30 days game time. Go through Molten Core as a raid, you go through Blackwing Lair, you go through Uncourage, and then you go through Naxxramas. And all of these are obviously you're spending time getting world buffs, consumables, and stuff like that. And if you die in these raids, you die still. Like, none of these people have died yet on this character. They are all characters that have not died, which is incredible, by the way. For 30 days old game time, not dying, that is pretty good. I do have to admit, that is pretty impressive. So, they walk into Naxxramas. They're doing their, like, sort of clearing, okay? They're doing all of the bosses. They're doing military ward. They're obviously taking it very slowly. Slowly in terms of like what people usually would, because no one wants to mess up, get the character accidentally killed and all of that. So military ward houses 3 bosses, same as every single like quarter of Naxxramas, and it has Resuvius, Gothic. Is it Gothic the Harvester? Yes, it is, and the 4 Horsemen. Resuvius goes down without a problem. Very nice. Gothic goes down without a problem. Very nice. So they're clearing the trash towards the 4 Horsemen. They've cleared everything. They're discussing tactics and stuff. Now, the idea with 4 Horsemen is you have 4 bosses in one. You have Lady Blomo, Sir Zeliek, Thane, and in this version of World of Warcraft, Mograine. But obviously, people who play Wrath Classic or Retail know him as Baron Rivendare because that's the horseman that resides there now. But in this version, it is Mograine. So the idea with this is essentially you need 8 tanks. 8 tanks. It's insane. You take 1 horseman to each of the corners of the room. It's a square room. So Lady Blomo goes top left, Zeliek goes top right, Mograine goes bottom right, and then Thane goes bottom left. You can do multiple ways of this boss, but the way that they were going to do was every single DPS go on to Thane and nuke him. Like, send all of your damage at him, which is fine. That's a very reasonable way to do this boss, essentially. With the healers, you rotating and stuff like that. So Thane, they all have their own unique abilities. Thane has a meteor that you stack up. You all have to stack, and essentially, if you don't, you're going to get one shot. Blomo puts some patches on the ground. You simply move out. The other ones, my God, I've forgotten the other ones. Mograine doesn't really do much. I'm pretty sure he puts like a mortal strike on someone. I think it's something like that. And then Zeliek does a beam, a chain lightning, as you will. And this chain lightning is chains indefinitely and keeps going. Like, it will keep going and do double the damage from the like previous one. So if it starts off 10 damage, goes to 20 damage on the next person, and then that's 40 damage, 80 damage. You can see how quickly it can get out of hand, especially if people are at like, I was around 5,000 health on my mage, I think. And this beam starts at like 2,000. You know, it's pretty good. So once it starts to chain, it can really ramp up quickly. But essentially, you need 8 tanks, and they're constantly swapping. So when people get marks, as throughout the fight, the horsemen give you marks. Essentially, when you get to 3 or 4 marks, you switch tanks. So tank 5 will taunt off a tank 1, etc. And then the previous tank who, has 4 marks runs to the center and drops, just waits there and drops the marks. So they are nuking Thane. You have about, let me see if I can do this quickly, the maths, 40 people in a raid. You have 2 healers on each of the bosses, so 2 top left, 2 top right, 2 bottom right. And then you have the tanks up there, so you have 1 tank, so 3, 3, 9. You have about 31 people in a pile on Thane, nuking Thane, alright, this one boss. So the first person, so they run in and they pick up the bosses. Where it goes wrong, or I say wrong, where the shit goes down is when the tank who's tanking Zeliek, the person who chain lightnings, runs Zeliek into the entire raid group that is stacked up. They are stacked. They cannot move because if they do, they run the risk of getting hit by a meteor. Right? So Zeliek is being pulled towards this group, this massive group, and it's only a matter of time before a chain lightning goes off and wipes the entire thing. A warrior does actually try and taunt Zeliek off of this guy who's bringing Zeliek to the group and run him away, but the guy bringing Zeliek re-taunts him and keeps running him into the group. So he is actively griefing them, on hardcore characters with 1 life. He's actively pulling this boss that can one-shot everyone into the group to one-shot them. And he succeeds. He ends up killing 36 people in this boss fight. He griefed 35, I think, because I think the 36th person was himself. But he ended up griefing all of them characters. With 1 chain lightning, he killed about 70% of the raid. It's insane to think. Now, you think, okay, there's obviously going to be griefers everywhere in the game. It's a common staple point of any sort of game, any multiplayer game. The problem lies with the fact that he was in that guild for about 6 to 9 months, apparently, somewhere around that. And he was making friends with them. So he was a known griefer. Firstly, he was a known griefer, and the guild found out 2 months while he was in the guild that he was a known griefer, and they decided to keep him, which, by the way, in my honest opinion, is probably the worst idea that you could do, because from my experience, people who grief don't tend to just give it up immediately, but they have their reasons, and I'm sure it was very good reasons. But essentially, from my point of view, and in hindsight, let's face it, it looks pretty bad and stupid. But essentially, what he did was befriend them and actually just play with them. He played with them for 9 months, became their friends, played with them outside of World of Warcraft as well, playing, I believe it was Scribblio and, these party sort of games, and actually just playing games with people, enjoying their time. All the while, he was planning to grief them. How crazy is that? This guy for 9 months had a plan. He had a plan that he would befriend them, become a tank in the raid group, become a trusted tank in the main group. So there's this list. He had to not die. He had to level a character to level 60, become a tank in this raid, befriend the raid, gain their trust in the raid, spend time collecting consumables, world buffs, going to the raids. He did this for 9 odd months, which is crazy, to think. And then he griefed them. That was it. That was his whole goal, and he did it. It's insane to think. It really is insane to think. Honestly, they kind of shot themselves in the foot by just accepting a griefer into the guild, and kind of trusting him with that sort of thing. But they have their reasons, I'm sure, and I think some of them were like their tanks had quit or just died, so they were in need of tanks. So, it's kind of you really can't, be picky with your one choice, that kind of deal. But yeah, I just thought it was insane. If you haven't seen it, go look it up. Just type it in like World of Warcraft griefing Naxxramas, something like that, and it will come up. There will be clips of it. It is really something. But to think that he did that for 9 months, he was so committed to it for 9 months. He became friends with some of them just to grief them. That is some psychotic shit. I'm not gonna lie, that's crazy. Yeah, that's kind of the whole drama around like WoW Classic at the moment. I don't really know what to say because obviously my opinion doesn't matter on it, but it's crazy. It's kind of in a weird way, it's kind of funny to see. But at the same time, it's very upsetting because they could have done something which was kill Kel'Thuzad with a whole group of raiders that haven't died on that character in that raid group, which would have been really cool to see. I believe that they're still going to try, from what last I heard, but it's not going to be as kind of impressive because they technically died, but they're appealing it because it is a grief. So, we'll only see from here. But honestly, it's really something to see, and yeah, it's what will happen like a fair amount in Hardcore Classic when the servers go. I'm pretty sure there will be 1 or 2 more of these times that it happens. This might be the very first one, but that I would guess that 2 more come along at the very least, because people they just have a different agenda. You don't know what their agenda is. That's the thing. But that is it for this episode. Thank you all very much for listening, as always. Please check out all of the socials and stuff down below. You've got links to Twitch, YouTube, everything's happening on these socials. Thank you all very much for listening, and go with Valor, friend. Goodbye all.